Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. Our new release this week is episode 2 of Harvest Moon Homecoming. It's the first book in Jessie Gussman's very first sweet romance series, Sweet Haven Farms. Now, I've got more about the story and a preview of episode 2 for you in just a bit. But first, I had a little news I wanted to share. Since we started the Say with Jay YouTube channel coming up on 2 years ago, we've worked really hard to build up a library of full-length and free audiobooks by Jessie Gussman. And what that means is that for the last 2 years, Jessie has been writing and releasing a new novel every 2 weeks. I think you will join with me in agreeing that is utterly amazing. Now, I have also been releasing a new audiobook every 2 weeks, but that pales in comparison to what Jessie's been doing. I mean, writing a new book every 2 weeks. But I will admit that that has taken a lot of hours, a lot of long hours, pretty much every day. And after a bit of discussion, Jessie and I have both agreed that that kind of pace isn't really sustainable for the long run. And since we are both in this for the long haul, we're going to be tapping the brakes just a little bit. Jessie is going to begin releasing her novels on a 3-week cycle instead of 2. And of course, I'll do the same with audiobooks. Now, that's going to give Jessie a chance to write longer stories if she wants to give them a little more polish, and essentially it's the same for me on the audiobook side. Now, we do still intend to bring you new content every single Friday, and the way we're going to accomplish that is by releasing 2 weeks of episodes back to back instead of episodes every other week. One other thing I wanted to share, and I'm really excited about this. As you know, Jessie has written in her books often about her characters searching for ways to be a blessing to others. And it's something we should all aspire to. I think the Bible instructs us to. And now, you've heard me talk about, in these previews, our channel membership program, and one of the perks in it is that we have a daily Bible reading for members. It's a short video, a minute or two long, with a selection of scriptures to just basically give you a way to spend a few moments with the Word of God. And while I certainly hope that this has been a blessing for channel members, we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to make that a blessing to more people? So, starting tomorrow, the daily Bible readings will be available to everyone. Now, there's already a playlist for the daily Bible readings, and if you have notifications turned on, which you can do down below, and hopefully you have, then you'll get a notification about each daily Bible reading as well. In any case, we certainly hope that it will be a blessing to you and bring a little bit of extra joy into your day. Okay, that's all the news, so let's talk about this week's new release. Harvest Moon Homecoming is a story of opposites. To start with, we have Mr. Calvin Finkenbender. Mr. Finkenbender is pretty much the poster child for order. He is obsessively neat. He is a stickler for the rules. And if you were to try to describe his personality in one word, 2 words, it would be buttoned up, would be a good way to describe him. When the story opens, we meet the bane of his existence, Chaos. And Chaos has a name, Mrs. Ellie Bright. Ellie is a widow, and she's raising her straight-A senior daughter with her in-laws there on their family farm. And her life is in constant disarray. One of the things she has a lot of trouble with is getting her daughter to school on time. Well, as luck would have it, when Mr. Finkenbinder decides to do something about this and calls her into his office for a meeting, it just so happens that he learns that the school's entry into the town's Farmers' Day parade has been accidentally demolished. Well, he decides on the spur of the moment that in order to avoid her daughter going to after-school detention for tardiness that was her fault and not her daughter's, Mrs. Bright is going to have to help him rebuild the school float as punishment. Well, she agrees, and when she does, order and chaos are thrown together, and some very unpredictable and romantic results occur. Now, I'm not going to say any more about the story, but here is a preview of the first few minutes of Episode 2. Episode 1 is already available in our library for you to watch, but I hope you'll watch that and enjoy this preview, and then come back this Friday for the full release of Episode 2 here on Say with Jay. Mr. Finkenbinder swung the tractor into the turnaround and eased the clutch out, allowing it to chug back onto the lane. He hadn't driven a tractor since he'd left the farm for good. He'd always enjoyed the work, but he had never cared for the stigma attached to it. A stab of guilt flashed through his heart, like it always did when he thought of his childhood home. It was sold now, and he couldn't go back. He'd made his choice. Now the only option he had was to live with it. He half-turned in the seat to make sure the children stayed seated, but so far there'd been no problems. Well, there was one problem. His gaze kept straying to Mrs. Bright. At the school, she always seemed oddly out of place, but she looked right at home in the pumpkin patch, laughing with the kids, and his heart had given a gentle tug in his chest when she'd knelt before little Izzy. Although he was the high school principal, he did occasional work at the elementary school, which was directly beside the high school. He knew most of the students. Izzy exuded sweetness. If he had favorites, which he most certainly did not, she would be one of them. He forced himself to remember the chaos of the shop and office. How could anyone live and work in such an unorganized, messy environment? After seeing Mrs. Bright with Izzy, he thought maybe she wasn't the Wicked Witch of the West, but being around her for any length of time would drive him batty. By 4:30, all four groups had spent half an hour at each station and were gathered around the hay bale pyramid. Because of its low southern track, the sun drooped in the sky, casting long shadows along the leaf-strewn yard as the children ran and played. Mr. Finkenbinder checked his watch. It was almost time for parents to start arriving to pick up their children. He glanced over at the picnic tables where Mrs. Bright stood holding scissors, snipping bits of lace and ribbon as the children brought them to her. She smiled and laughed with the children, adjusting a piece of ribbon or sorting through the piles of odds and ends to pick a perfect piece. He breathed deeply. Wood smoke mixed with rich fall air, falling leaves, and the dampness of soil as it readied to spend a season resting. a comforting, cozy scent. Peace and goodwill settled into his soul. The children were finishing up their projects, and when he glanced over again, Mrs. Bright stood idle. He found his feet taking him to her. "You have a beautiful place and a nice setup here." She looked up, twisting a piece of ribbon in her hand. Her hair had frizzed out all over her head, and one strand was caught in her mouth again. He tore his eyes away before he started thinking about her lips. "Thanks," she said. He looked around. "The kids are having a great time. I mean, it could have been more educational." "I should have known you were coming over here to complain." A kid walked up holding out a piece of ribbon, and she snipped where he pointed. "I'm not complaining. I complimented you." "And I said thank you. Then you close your mouth and we part friends." She lifted a brow and stuck out her chin, barely looking before cutting another ribbon with a quick snip. "You don't have to be such a wise guy all the time." His neck heated, and he clenched his jaw. "And maybe you ought to make sure you don't cut anyone's fingers with those scissors." "I'm a woman, not a guy, and you don't have to be such a stick in the mud." She rested her hand on her hip. At least, he assumed it was her hip, but with the shapeless coveralls and the baggy green shirt, he couldn't even be sure she had hips. 4 legs and scales, possibly. Her face had turned red. "And if you think you can do my job better, have at it." Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.